All right, we are here with Lindsay Wasserman. She is a licensed clinical social worker and the owner of the Sterling Group, which is a therapy practice in DC that helps 20 and 30 somethings navigate all the changes and challenges of young adulthood. Lindsay and the Sterling Group specializes in helping young adults develop healthy boundaries and overcome perfectionist and overachieving tendencies. Personally, I've known Lindsay for a couple of years. We're in the same business group, so it's great to have you on. Thanks, Lindsay.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. We're physical therapists that focus on people who want to exercise. So a question I always like to ask everybody is, if you could only do one form of exercise for the rest of your life, what would it be?
That would be circuit training and strength training for me.
Okay. Shout out to F45 U Street. We've taken a couple classes together there. 6 a.m. early morning classes over there. So shout out to Kevin and F45 U Street.
Yes, always my buddies.
So, so we'll talk a little bit about overachieving. We'll talk about a little bit about perfectionism. Who's the type of person you like to help the most?
I love to help people that are perfectionists that are have achieved a lot in their lives and are super successful, by all kind of societal measures, and have kind of reached that point where they're feeling stuck or realizing that it isn't working. It's working, but internally it's not working, and that they're not living the happy, fulfilled lives that they thought they would be if they were kind of at this level that they've achieved.
Got it. This speaks directly to my heart because I'm definitely a perfectionist and an overachiever. So maybe we'll do a
Me
little
too.
therapy session for me while we're doing the interview. So I think a lot of people, I'm speaking personally, just with perfectionism or overachieving, they don't necessarily think it's a problem. So you just said feeling stuck or not feeling fulfilled. What are some signs that somebody might, the tools that they have, like overachieving or perfectionism, might not be serving them in the way that might be best?
Yeah, I think that again, that it often comes to a place of burnout. So either it's not working because they can't sustain that level of constant achievement. And I also, like to ask people who are hesitant or unsure or don't believe me when I say it's problematic, and ask, how they handle when they do achieve something, when they do, get praise, get validation, accomplish a task. Like, how does it feel? Does it feel good, or does it feel fine, but what's next, or we minimize it? And that to me is the biggest sign of perfectionism, is not what happens when you fail, but what happens when you succeed.
That's a really interesting and great way to look at it because again, I'm going to make this about me, but because that's all my experience. But for a long time, and still to this day, if I achieved anything, I would almost just brush it off, and it wouldn't really mean anything, and I would just move on to the next thing. So I realized that kind of grinded me down a little bit. So how do you let's take it. There's two different ways to take that, right? So how do you talk to someone that doesn't necessarily like feel that way yet or see that, and maybe preemptively help them not get to that burnout phase? Is there anything to do before they get to the burnout phase, or do they almost have to realize it themselves?
A little bit of both. You don't necessarily need that rock bottom moment, but I think that what I like to start from the place that, that perfectionism and overachieving, like, these are protective, like, patterns that we have. These are, for a lot of our lives, they're adaptive. Particularly, you know people in our generation kind of grew up in this society where grades mattered, extracurriculars mattered, the college you went to mattered, GPA. These were kind of the benchmarks, to be considered smart, gifted, special, worthy. So that helped us to, survive and get praise and, achieve success in these ways. So, we don't necessarily want to, like, burn the whole house down, but recognizing, like, that it does serve us, and how it, why it's there, and what are the benefits. Because just with everything in life, it's not so black and white. So what are the pieces that do help us to set goals, achieve, reach the things that we want to have in our lives? And what are the ways that it holds us back. And I think even if you haven't reached that stuck point or that burnout point yet, most people can identify that it is causing, some sort of pain or getting in the way of of happiness or fulfillment or self-esteem and how they feel about themselves. I think people often realize that, they're striving for perfectionism, but they feel like a failure all the time. So what? So that discrepancy and is a good place to start as well.
Got it. Makes sense. And I like a couple of things you said. First, I like how you said like you don't necessarily approach it from how does someone feel when they fail, but how do they feel when they succeed. That's an interesting kind of framework that I haven't necessarily thought of. But then also I like that you said like sometimes these tendencies actually serve us, so we don't have to totally get rid of all of them. But how do we keep maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but paraphrasing, like how do we keep the parts that serve us and maybe take away the parts that don't? Is that kind of the approach that you sometimes take?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's scary for a lot of people to say, like, okay, stop being a perfectionist, stop overachieving, because again, we go to the other extreme of, okay, so then what? I'm stagnant, accept laziness or complacency. And again, that black and whiteness is not serving anyone in this sense. So, looking at like what does bring fulfillment, what are the pieces of doing well at school or work or life that are really meaningful to you, like because of your own values and what's important, rather than other people's expectations, our parents, our bosses. We can't throw that one out all the way in a job setting, but trying to kind of bring it back to like what is truly meaningful and valuable to you, and what is being driven by like external pressures that are pushing this kind of fear-based perfectionism, rather than like something that's actually fulfilling. And that, again, you can be high achieving, successful, fulfilled, growing, without the perfectionist piece that isn't helpful. There can be both. There can be room for both.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think it's really easy to think like if I wasn't overachieving or if I wasn't trying this hard, I would achieve nothing almost, or I would be a failure. So I think it's really important for people to understand that hey, that you can have a little bit of both, and that's one of the things that took me a long time to figure out. So you talked a little bit about finding what actually is fulfilling and what is meaningful. What are some strategies you help people with, or what are some strategies people can do to actually go through that process? Because I find that not a lot of people have necessarily put the thought into that. So how do they get started?
Yeah, so I like to say that the steps here are simple but not easy. These are very difficult patterns to undo and redo, but it starts with really allowing space and, most importantly, compassion for the parts of you that are imperfect and that make mistakes, and allow for that to be there. So looking at your self-talk, looking at how you are thinking about yourself, and noticing those perfectionist tendencies and saying, is there a way to talk about this to myself or think about this more fairly? Is there a way, is it okay if I make a mistake? Like what, can I, that doesn't mean we're complacent in that I want to make the mistake, but can I allow that the mistake happened, and, without all of the mechanisms to beat ourselves up, avoid it, hide it. If we can accept our own flaws and imperfections, then we can start to allow other people to see them. And that's really where like perfectionism is really about kind of hiding those flaws that we know are there, but that we don't want others to see for fear of, you know, rejection or punishment, things like that. So it's kind of a getting comfortable with that, and then ultimately desensitizing that it's always going to be painful to fail. It's always going to be painful to be rejected or to make a mistake, but it's not going to kill you. And that it can actually, make space for other things in your life, and for like real genuine connections, because you're not trying so hard to, show this perfect persona.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So it sounds like the first step often, and again, maybe I'm paraphrasing, so correct me if I'm wrong here. The first step is kind of just being aware of what you're thinking and what you're feeling around these different things. And before you don't need to change anything yet, just being aware of like how you're approaching things or what you're feeling or what your self talk is.
Yep, exactly. And my one of my favorite exercises to do with clients is to kind of look at the perfectionist, inner voice that's talking, the inner critic, and to like think about a situation where, for example, you made a mistake and really beat yourself up, and then think about if a or if I came to you, as a therapist or as someone in your life and said, I made this huge mistake, like, and I said that, like, how would you speak to me or to that friend who had done that? And noticing that, usually there's a big difference between the two. So kind of sitting with that and, trying to understand like why do we talk to ourselves so differently than we would talk to about or to someone that we care about, and how do we bridge that gap and try to get a little closer to the like more fair, compassionate, understanding
Yeah, I love that.
voice.
So like externalizing it and making it not about yourself and saying how would you speak to somebody else and not always making it about yourself so much.
Yeah, it's a
So
helpful perspective shift, to really notice like, oh, that is a really different way that I would never treat a friend like that.
so why do you treat yourself like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So what's a really rewarding moment or a great success story you've had recently? Anything in this area?
Um, I too am a recovering perfectionist and overachiever.
Aren't we all?
You know me pretty well, so um, so I don't. This is a little bit of both, a little bit of overachieving and a little bit of appreciating, and valuing my success and the Sterling Group success is, we just opened our new office, which is the first time we've had our own office suite, and we really doubled to tripled in size in terms of our number of offices and spaces that we have, for clients and for the team. So, that was a really rewarding moment for me to kind of see what we've built and grown as a practice, and being able to really see the clients come through the doors and be really at home and comfortable, like in a space that is all ours. So that's something I'm trying to, again, against my perfectionist tendencies, to really just sit with and be happy with and not think about like what's the next space, what are we doing next, but to just be really like appreciative and proud of where we are now.
Awesome, congratulations. You should be proud of that.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this before, but I kind of feel the same way. And a lot of business owners or highly achieving people almost feel no matter what they do, like, okay, what's the next thing? And no matter how much I achieved in business, it was great, but what's the next thing? So, did you find yourself kind of falling into those thought patterns, and you had to stop those thought patterns, or have you done enough work where it really is now just kind of natural, where you're appreciating things?
I wouldn't say it's natural yet. I'm still kind of somewhere in between fake it till you make it and like fully ingrained. I don't, I think it's a lifelong journey and kind of practice, as new things come up like in life and in business. I think and I say this to clients a lot, like our lives become more full and more complicated and more, just more things come into it as more responsibilities come into it as we, get older and move through life. So, for me, it's that balance of, I mean, like family life and business, but also how to balance like staying, content and appreciative, while also wanting to grow. So it's a ongoing journey for me for sure.
Yeah, I mean, finding balance is hard, and I think balance can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people. And what I've learned from one of my mentors is balance doesn't mean always being perfectly balanced all the time. It can mean going back and forth between one thing and another. And like you said, life changes. So one thing I've had to realize is And I think a lot of people that I talk to kind of feel like they want to solve a problem that they have. So they want to solve their overachieving tendency, and then it's gone forever. And I'm assuming that's not totally how it works. It might come back and then you deal with it. Or like, I don't want to, again, speak for you, but is that pretty common?
Yeah. No, and you're doing a great job paraphrasing. So I think you've been doing some of the work yourself, I would guess. Yeah, I think there's kind of foundational skills and again, healing those parts of ourselves that felt like we, only deserve, love and success if we are perfect, if we are constantly overachieving and growing. So there is some just foundational like healing and work that can be done around that like sets like the foundation of the house. But then yes, you add, the roof leaks, you add you add an extension, you redo the backyard. Like there's always, it's important that the foundations are there, and that they also like better equip you for, those future life things and challenges that come up.
Yeah, I like that analogy. Your self work isn't finished. It's just okay. There's other things we can add on top of it. And also, if you own a house, something happens and you have to fix it. And we can probably take that same approach when it comes to mental health, physical health, or really just any kind of self work.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's we one of the things we like to do physical health is kind of bust myths or decrease misconceptions. So what do you think is one of the biggest misconceptions or myth that you like to bust for your clients when it comes to overachievers or perfectionists?
That's a good one. We've talked about this already, but I think the biggest myth is that like to be successful, I have to be perfect. To be worthy, I have to be constantly growing and changing. I guess maybe a more controversial myth is that, the growth. Well, I guess what I like to debunk is that, a growth mindset is like the ideal at all times. And again, I think that can be shocking for people, but I think that growth, like having that phrase growth mindset and that being again the ideal, like when we're hiring, when we're looking for jobs, when we're working on new things, like we're always looking for that growth mindset. And I think again that's one of, it's not so much debunking the whole idea of growth mindset, but taking the black and whiteness out of it and saying like when is it helpful and necessary to have the growth mindset, like starting something new, learning something, yeah, starting a new job, kind of learning a new thing. Absolutely, the growth mindset is like important and necessary. And then at what point is it, can we say like, okay, I'm proficient, I'm competent in this, I'm, happy with where I am for now, and sure, I have other goals, but is it okay to, you know, to sit in this for a moment? Again, without that, okay, what's next? Or minimizing that accomplishment because it just raises the bar. So I think that's one of the hotter takes.
I would say that is a hot take, and it was a little shocking for me to hear because if you read any business book or any professional book or career development, and everybody always talks you want to have growth mindset, you want to surround yourself people with growth mindset. So I think that is pretty interesting to me because you don't hear a lot of the other side of do we need that growth mindset 100% of the time. So that is pretty interesting to me. So how would you then help someone understand when that growth mindset is serving them and maybe when it's not actually serving them?
Yeah, I think and to your reaction that it's, growth mindset all the time in all areas. So sometimes it means, like you said a couple moments ago, balancing. So we can't, it's the realization that we can't be growing in all areas of our life at all times. So sometimes it's prioritizing, sometimes it's even momentarily like, okay, I had this success, I accomplished this thing, like can I celebrate that and internalize that rather than like, okay, what's next? Or now the bar's raised. So how do I keep proving that I'm, better and better and better? So it, again, it's not, eliminating that mindset completely, but adding more nuance and, adding space that even if it's rest, I'm not like this week, I'm not going, it's okay that I do good enough at work, or that this one project is, a 80% of my best, because I, need to slow down. I need to rest. I'm taking a vacation, for example. So, it's more of allowing it to kind of ebb and flow, rather than, the all or nothing, like either growth mindset or fixed mindset as like a personality trait, is what I disagree with. So just allowing more flexibility in there.
Yeah, I like that. And you've mentioned a few times nuance. You've mentioned black and white. So is that something? It sounds like that comes up fairly often in your work with people.
Yes, very often. I think perfectionism is a great example of it, and also why it's tied so closely is like perfectionism is really a is very black and white in its truest form, and it's a pass fail system where passing is 100% and anything else is failing. So that's at the extreme end, obviously, but I think that, when we're in that mindset of either it's perfect or I've failed, that obviously, is setting us up for, I mean, one, it's unrealistic and certainly unsustainable, even if we can, do it in certain areas or in certain ways. So, just recognizing that most things are both and, rather than one or the other. And that's, the kind of counter to that black and white perfectionism is good enough. And, what if, you were again at 80 or 90% of perfection? Is that failing or is that good enough? And when is that okay? When do we need to really push for 90, 95, 100%? And when is it okay to, be in that good enough range? Or to prioritize other things that are not achievement based, like rest, self care, time with friends, time with family, that contribute to like our overall like balance and wellness and happiness, but sometimes often get pushed to the end of the bottom of the totem pole because they're not kind of connected to that like achievement, and success in like a tangible way.
Yeah, and I think that resonates with me, especially. Good enough used to be a very scary term for me, and good enough almost meant I was settling. And I've had to do a lot of work on good enough. Actually, that the phrase "good enough" is good, but I used to look at it as a negative. So personally, that what you just said really speaks to me because that was a scary term to me, not necessarily something to strive for.
Yeah, and I think the other piece, that makes it more challenging as we get older is that we don't, in most areas of our lives or all areas of our adult lives, we don't get grades anymore. There aren't these same benchmarks quarterly or annually that say, this is how you're doing in all of these areas. Like this, again, the number of extracurriculars, number of APs, the colleges that you get into, are very like tangible, concrete ways that like we all learned to like base our success on. So when we enter, our adult lives and the like professional space, an annual review isn't cutting it. It isn't, we're not getting that. Even if we get feedback from, bosses and supervisors, we're not the areas that like become important in our lives, including work, but also, family, social, health, we're not usually getting like a grade or a score for that. So that can leave people feeling really lost and uncertain, like, well, how do I gauge like how well I'm doing? And the best, like, okay, if something that's where that pass fail comes in, because we don't know how else to, to quantify or qualify it. So it's, I'm perfect or I'm not, which, requires a lot of internal reworking too, to, how do we gauge for ourselves, what success or what fulfillment is without those like number and letter scores.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective because I've probably thought about it, but maybe not in those exact ways of we're constantly evaluated externally and given a number or a letter or something that's very objective of how well you're doing. And then all of a sudden you get to mid 20s, mid 30s, and there's a lot of gray about what success looks like. And it can be hard, I'm sure, for a lot of people to make that transition from the black and white of success to the gray of what does success even mean?
Yeah. And we're in DC, right? So people are are moving up corporate chains or law firms, politics. There can be kind of a steady like ladder of growth professionally. And I think people also come with, okay, well, I can, success means like that tangible success means making partner at my firm, for example. But I see those partners and they work 18 hours a day, and that's not what I want. But if I'm not striving for that, then am I just being like complacent where I am now? And that sort of identity crisis really
Yeah.
comes up.
So if somebody's listening or watching and they this resonates with something inside of them, what's one thing you would say start doing today so that they can start building some momentum? Is it that awareness piece, or is there something else you'd say maybe start with this today?
I would say the awareness and the this compassion. So being aware, noticing, and then practicing being kind to yourself, which again feels really simple and understated, but it's a hard, I think people are sometimes surprised when they're not paying attention to it, are surprised at like how harsh they can be on themselves, and to just try a different approach.
Yeah. So just start being aware of what thoughts are even going on.
Yeah.
So this has been great. So if you wanted to leave everybody watching, listening with one piece of advice, or what's one thing you wish everyone knew, what would that be?
Big question. I think just that, you are enough and you are worthy. And if it doesn't, like just exactly as you are right now, and if it doesn't feel that way, then, that there's some work to do. It's possible to feel that way. But
That's awesome.
it's hard.
Yeah, one thing I realize is it is possible to not constantly feel like that, and that I think that's one great thing that everybody should be aware of. So this has been great, Lindsay. So if people are interested, where can they find you? Where can they learn more?
Yeah, so we're located in DC, and we also offer virtual therapy in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. You can find us. Our website is thesterlinggroupdc.com, and you can also find us on socials at the Sterling Group DC.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your time today, Lindsay.
Thanks, Jesse.